Hello. Today we're going to be discussing the Kuali Research Dashboard and Proposal Development. This is the Kuali Research Dashboard. This is the page that users are brought to when they first log into Kuali Research. You can see several cards are displayed here currently. The first card is Proposals Routing to Me, and this will show an approver any proposals that are either ready for their approval, where they will say you're up, or any proposals that are going to be routed for them. So they can see however many steps away those proposals are, so they have a sense of the workload that they'll have in the future. This is also very useful for approvers in the central office because then they can see everything that's been submitted into routing. And especially for managers or directors, it's a good way to get a sense of the workload that they're going to have for an extended period of time. It gives a good sneak peek at what's going on with a given deadline if your research office is at the end of your routing progression. Then the next three cards here, proposals not routing, awards work in progress, and institutional proposals work in progress, are all showing documents that are just saved. Nothing has happened with them yet. So this helps users who have started a document and saved it and they need to get back to the document. It provides good visibility into that. This will show them all documents that they have access to. And so it isn't necessarily just the documents that they've created, it's also any documents in their department, or again, in the central office, maybe any documents in the system that are in this saved status. It helps avoid having orphaned versions of awards or institutional proposals. And it also gives you visibility into the number of proposals that are being created that maybe haven't been routed yet. So again, it's a good way to get a sense of the volume as you approach a given deadline. There are some other cards that are available for the dashboard, and we will be continuing to build more cards for the dashboard. A user can come here to show hide cards, and they can create the dashboard that makes the most sense for them. You can see we have subawards work in progress, which is similar to the other ones. It just gives you visibility into saved subawards, and proposal workload assignments, which is a little farther down. And that just helps knowing who's been assigned to a given proposal. This list will be expanding over time as we add additional items, so you should come back and check and see what makes sense for your institution. Next, we're going to come over here to Common Tasks, and we're going to come down to Proposal Development. This Common Tasks page shows all of the links for any modules that your institution is currently using. But in this case, we want to go to Proposal Development, and we are going to create a new proposal. So here, the Create Proposal screen is set up so that we have to put in some basic information about the proposal at the beginning of the process. These fields are necessary to have proper context for any documents in the system. They drive system behavior. Lead unit drives permissions, and it drives your workflow. Activity type drives budget behavior and rates. Project dates also drive budget behavior and rates. You need the title really as an anchor in several places in the application, and the sponsor type will also drive behavior such as whether or not S2S is available, and a number of other rules that may be set up in the system commonly by institutions. Proposal type is just one of the main markers, and so we want to keep that highlighted at a high level. And so we do require that. If you're doing system to system, proposal type will drive some other functionality in the system as well. So I am going to come here, and we are going to select our proposal type. When I do lead unit, I can do a type ahead and search. So if you have a particularly large unit hierarchy and you make that visible to everyone, it's very easy to navigate. We're going to choose research as our activity type and put in a pretty standard 5-year period. And so you can select those dates by the date picker, and then put in my research title. And when I come down to sponsor, I can also do a type ahead and search for the sponsor in a number of different ways. So depending on how I know my sponsor, I can very easily do a type ahead to get to it. In this case, I'm going to search for NIH, and we are going to select that as the sponsor. When we hit save and continue, we will now create our proposal. The first option, and not all institutions have to have this turned on, is a notification that goes out as soon as the proposal is created. This could go out to a dean, or maybe it goes to your central office. Depending on the volume, that might be useful, or it might be a little bit overwhelming. But there are several instances where it makes sense to send this notification out as soon as a proposal is created in the system, but this is an optional notification. You can turn this off if it's not something that you want to send. So we're going to go ahead and send that notification. And now we have our basic proposal attributes. We can see here that all of the information that we entered on that first screen has been populated. If we need to enter in a prime sponsor or keywords, we can now do that, and we can begin to fill out all of the other information about this particular proposal. So the first thing we're going to do is go to the next page and enter in a system-to-system opportunity. So here on this page, I can now search for an opportunity. One thing to be aware of with this search screen is this directly interfaces with the federal servers. So this particular search has slightly different parameters than some of our other searches, and that's because we're limited to what the federal servers can return. So this is meant to be a place to come and search for your opportunity once you know what you're applying to build your application. This is not a true search for opportunity when you're going out to investigate what might make sense for you to submit a grant to. So I am going to come and put in PAEN-R01, and we are going to search for this R01 opportunity. And it comes back, and I can see the opening date, the closing date, the schema URL, and some other details about this particular opportunity. When I press select, it will now be pulled in to my proposal. And I can come and I can look at the individual forms that are available. I can see which ones are included and required, which ones are optional. We can see here that this one is not available to include, and it is not mandatory. If you do have a situation where you have a submission where you need to include this form for your particular grant, you can download this individual form by clicking on these links. You can fill out the details and then attach it in user attached forms. There are certain forms that just have complicated data that isn't necessarily available in the system. We take a very sort of TurboTax approach to completing grants.gov forms, so you don't have to complete it multiple times to both get your institution's proposal data into the system and to do it a second time for your grants.gov opportunities. But doing that means occasionally there is a more complicated form that we can't quite accommodate, and those are available as user attached forms, and we provide a link directly to those in the application. Next, we're going to come down and take a look at some of the other fields that are available in the proposal. There's delivery information. For situations that are not system to system, you can come here and put in information when you're doing a foundation or a nonprofit, and you have to either email, mail, or engage with a non-standard system so that the central office knows what needs to be done to submit your proposal. Next, there's sponsor and program information. This is where you'll include deadline information or other information about the proposal, such as the notice of opportunity, what the opportunity type is. In this case, our opportunity ID is automatically populated by our system-to-system submission, but if we were doing something that was non-standard or even doing a federal submission without system-to-system, those fields would be available for us to enter more information. You can capture the NSF science codes, which we will maintain in system as we upgrade Kuali over time. And those are used to drive the herd survey and then you can keep, other main information about the opportunity here. The next section is organization and location. This is where we're going to keep information about our applicant organization, which populates automatically. Performing organization, which also populates automatically based on your configuration in the system. But you can override this if you have a situation where you have multiple performing organizations you do review for. We can list performance sites, which are searched from a general address book that you can maintain of individual addresses for your performance sites. Or we can search for other organizations. The other organizations are kept in a more standard organization table, and the organization table can be used to make sure you have very solid, consistent reporting on any collaborating or subaward organizations that you have relationships with. Next, we're going to come down and look at how to add personnel to the proposal. On the personnel page, we have the option to add key personnel. So I'm going to click on personnel, and we are going to look for Professor Chu and search, and we bring back Inez Chu. As you can see on that page, there are several other data elements you can search on. If you know the exact username, you can search based off of that. I also put in asterisks on either side of Dr. Chu's name, and those are wildcards. So anyone whose last name included CHEW would have returned, and that's a way to hone in on a user when you're not sure exactly how their name might be formatted in your university's person source. So we are going to select Inez Chu and continue, and we are going to add them as the PI contact. PI contact is populating because I selected NIH as the sponsor. If I had selected a different sponsor in the system that was not part of PHS, then I would have gotten principal investigator. So you can maintain different key personnel role names based on the sponsor that you are submitting to. The sponsor table is defined by your institution, and so you can select which sponsors prompt which behavior, which names to appear. So we are going to expand the details on Inez. You can see right here underneath his name, these are conflict of interest details. We'll go into this in more detail later in the conflict of interest video, but you can see here that this project will require an update. This user is currently working on a conflict of interest disclosure. Maybe they've submitted multiple projects and they're already working on the disclosure for one of the other projects they're submitting to this particular deadline. And we can see from the disposition status that this project, unsurprisingly, because an update is still needed, has not been submitted and has not been fully dispositioned by the Conflict of Interest Office. We can now see down here a number of different details about this individual. We can see more advanced name information. We can enter in an ERA Commons username for them so that the system-to-system opportunity can pass all of its validations. Or if this were an NSF opportunity, we could enter in their NSF ID, and then we can see additional details from their organization record. And we can populate high-level effort. Depending on your university policies, you may or may not use all of these fields. We can see additional extended personnel details. We can enter in information about their degrees, which may be useful in a system-to-system submission, or we can see unit details to see who they report up to. We can also see a full listing of person training. I'll go ahead and load the person training so you can see how that displays. If you have any trainings in the system, perhaps a user has to be certified in proposal development before they're allowed to submit proposal development opportunities, and you want to track that, you can have that displayed directly in the proposal development document. Finally, we have certification. This is customizable. Each institution can have their own certification questions. As the person who's creating this proposal, I have the right to come in and complete this certification for the researcher, and then I can attach that certification separately to document it in the proposal. That's an optional configuration. Some institutions prefer to require the researcher to sign in and to complete their own certification. And so we have the option to notify our personnel. So I can see how many times Inez Chu has been notified. I will go ahead and send the notification out that this proposal needs their certification now. And now if I bring this up again, I have the history of when they were last notified, indicating whether or not this is overdue and maybe something I need to follow up on if they have not yet certified. For now, though, I'm going to go ahead and complete these certifications and save. And we can see here that the details on that certification have been stored, the date and time it was made, as well as who entered the certification. So if this certification is done via proxy, it's apparent to anyone who comes back and looks at this record. And then at that time, they know I'm going to need to look for other supplemental information confirming that this certification was done by the researcher. We're going to go ahead and add a second person to this proposal. I'm going to look up Kate. And we are going to add Allison Kate as a PI multiple. And you can see now that we have similar details. There's COI information. And I'm going to go ahead and come over and complete their certification as well. This is really just to show what it looks like when we have multiple individuals listed on the proposal. And so you can see how that will play out in the credit split process. Next, we're going to look at credit allocation. And for the credit allocation, you can see here we have recognition and F&A as options. These can be set up as any categories that are appropriate for your institution. We're going to do a fairly straightforward credit split of 50-50 between the two investigators. Credit between your investigators has to add to 100%. And so the credit may all be going to the PI and everyone else may be getting a 0% cut of certain credit types like F&A, whereas recognition, you might split it up a little bit more dynamically. But in this case, we're going to go fairly straightforward. And then we see the units associated with these investigators. And it also needs to be split up to 100% within a given investigator. So I'm going to do 75 and 25. And then for F&A, we'll do 90 and 10. So we are differentiating between these categories. Because Alice and Kate only has one unit, they will get 100% of her credit in these categories. So that's how you manage credit split in the system. The next area that we're going to look at is compliance. And this is where you would add information on additional regulatory review that has to happen for this given proposal. So I can add a compliance entry. And here I'm going to go ahead and add human subjects details for the compliance entry. We can see that because this is system to system, we have some additional options to include the human study attachment if that's appropriate. And then we can include the details on whether or not this is a clinical trial, that this human subjects research relates to a clinical trial, or whether it's delayed onset, and then that can populate the system to system forms. I'm going to come here and indicate that I have not yet applied, because on several proposals, it's not unusual to have a situation where you've not yet applied for your human subjects review, and you're probably not going to until you have some indication that the proposal is going to be funded. So we'll go ahead and add that entry, and now we can expand this and see the details. It can be updated as with anything else in the proposal until we submit it. And then if we needed to add other compliance entries, we could do that here. Next, we're going to look at attachments in the system. So the attachments in the system come in several different categories. We can see here that we have proposal attachments. And so these include the attachments that relate to the proposal that will be submitted to the sponsor through system to system, or that you expect to put together into a package and send separately. If you are only using proposal development to collect your institutional approvals, these attachments don't have to be included, but several institutions will collect the full proposal attachment. You can see we have several options here. I can add an individual attachment. I can upload an ad, which will allow me to select multiple attachments and include them, or I can download all once I have a collection of attachments that allows me to download them in bulk just to save time. So we will click here, and I can select my attachment type. You can see all of these that say PHS have been included because we are connected to a system-to-system opportunity. And so any of the required attachments on that particular opportunity or any attachments that may be required are included here so that we can add them to the proposal. And then there are several standard attachment types that may be included on a non-system-to-system proposal. For this example, I'm going to include a basic narrative. We can indicate whether it's complete or incomplete. This is just to track drafts while you're in the middle of preparing your proposal, so you have a way to know what still needs to be reviewed and what's ready to be submitted to your institution for review. And then there are other optional details. If you have a collaborative proposal and there are multiple people uploading attachments and you want to know who's responsible for each attachment, this gives you a mechanism to track that in the system. I'm going to come here and we're going to add an attachment. You see that lookup works very much like adding an attachment to an email. You can also drag and drop attachments into the window from your file browser. When we save that, the individual attachment now displays. If I want to see any other details, I can come over here, click on details, and I can come in and see the other information about this attachment if I had been tracking contact information. Next, we have personnel. You can see we already have a personnel attachment here. There's a mechanism in the system where you can keep a record of biosketch or other information on certain personnel, and it will automatically populate proposals. This is a place for you to include proposal attachments that will be submitted to the sponsor, but that are associated with an individual person and need to be associated in system to system. So biosketches, current and pending, those sorts of attachments can all be included here. So they'll be uploaded through system to system. We have a place for abstracts. These are not actually attachments. If we click Add Abstract, then I can select an abstract type. We'll say equipment. I can include text of this abstract directly in the document. Some institutions really like to collect a standard abstract on all of the research so they can report on those abstract details, look for specific words that come up in the description of the research, and this can also be used to populate certain system-to-system opportunities. Next, we have internal attachments. If I add internal attachments, this is going to be very similar to proposal, although there are fewer options because these are attachments meant to track your internal processes. If you have sort of a non-standard cost share sign-off process that you aren't able to build in as routing into the system, you might include that attachment here. You might have a particular internal sign-off for sub-award form that you want to include here. You might want to include an internal budget for something like a modular submission or other situations where you don't require the detailed budget use for nonprofit or other situations. And so anything that needs to be routed but will not ultimately be sent to the sponsor will be included in this internal attachment section. And these attachments have their own list of types associated with them. The final area is notes. And this is just a place for you to add any notes in the system, extra details that you need to document about phone conversations or other things that don't have a fixed place in the system. You always sort of need to have a catch-all. And when I add that, it will appear here. One thing to be aware of with notes, since they are meant as a way to capture auditable details that don't neatly fit anywhere else in the system, they cannot be deleted or changed. So once a note has been added to a proposal, it is permanent and you should set up appropriate policies around that and be sure that everyone is trained on that detail. Next, we're going to look at the questionnaire. The questionnaire is a place in the system where you can ask supplemental questions about this particular proposal. These are going to be detailed questions of a nature where you want the researcher to really look at the question, see what you're asking, and try to get additional information from the researcher. One thing to be aware of with questionnaire is these questions will stay with the proposal submission. There's another section in the proposal where you can capture more administrative fields, structural data that you need to pull forward later into the award. And that's generally used for different purposes because it integrates with the award module, but these questions are really meant to be part of the proposal. So you can see here we have 3 sections. These first 2 sections are populating because this proposal has been connected to a system-to-system opportunity. So all of the questions that are necessary to populate the fields in that opportunity have been displayed here. So we can go through and answer. We did include a comment about human subjects. We know this is going to include human subjects. For the rest of these, for simplicity, I will answer no. And when we get down to this last question, whether I answer yes or no, there is a follow-up. So these questionnaires can be branching. They can show other dynamic data in the system, and it can respond and only show the questions that the user needs to see. So we are going to select our option. So I've completed all of the system-to-system questions. And now there are a number of questions that are being maintained by this institution. You can see there is another question about human subjects. This does occasionally come up where an institution may want to ask a question of all of their proposals that also appears on the federal forms, but it's a fairly rare situation. We are going to answer yes to that question. The primary purpose of asking these regulatory questions here is just to make sure that the researcher didn't miss including those details in the compliance section. And we're going to go through and answer no to all of these. We'll go ahead and answer 1 there to see again that we can also configure custom follow-up questions. That is available in all areas of the questionnaire, not just the system-to-system questions. For now, we're going to go ahead and bypass budget. That's going to be dealt with in detail in another video. And we're going to look at access options in the system. So here we have the permissions. There are a number of permissions in the system which can be provisioned based on unit or for the entire university, but there are times where you want to give an individual access just to a particular proposal. So maybe it's for a collaborating unit or just someone else in your department who shouldn't have access to all of the proposals in your department. You just want to give them access to this proposal so they can review a document or help you prepare certain pieces of the proposal. So we're going to click here and add user. This is the same lookup that we saw in the personnel section. And I will look up Ralston. So we found Damon Ralston, and we will select him. And now we can indicate what role we want to give Damon Ralston in the system. There are several different roles. Aggregator is really the power user, and they can see everything in the system. And then maybe we want Damon Ralston to help us with budgets. So we're going to go ahead and give him budget creator access. Where you see these only indicators, aggregator only, budget creator only, we are giving these individuals access to this proposal. We are not giving them the permission to see institutional salaries. Some institutions have very tight controls over who can see salary information. And salary information is designed to pull into budget automatically. These roles can also be narrowed down and made inactive if they don't necessarily apply for your particular institution's implementation. So this can be streamlined to help make things easier for your users. We're going to add this permission. And now Damon Ralston can get in and see the proposal, and he can create budgets or edit budgets in this particular proposal. The next area that we're going to look at is supplemental information. This is the other area of the proposal that I mentioned earlier, where we can set up custom fields, and these are more administrative fields, detailed reporting items that you might have that you need to pull forward into the award module. And so it's a little more streamlined than the questionnaire, but there may be important data points that you need to collect and populate into award if this proposal is funded. So here, as an example, we can set up a grant administrator assignment. Depending on your workflow, your central office may be involved before a proposal is submitted. And this is an example that I see fairly often. So we can make it clear that Claudia Hovis is working on this particular proposal. We may want to indicate a couple supplemental details, like how many trainees or graduate students will be working on this particular proposal, or we want to look up an individual whose inventions are being used on this proposal. You can see that these are not necessarily required fields. They can be configured to be required, and if they are, that will be indicated. So I'm going to leave inventions blank, indicating that we're not using any inventions from any faculty members on this particular proposal. This has been a walkthrough of the primary proposal elements in the system. In our next video, we will be looking at how to create a budget and then how to submit a finished